Hi guys.
Welcome. That time is another NBA recap, yo. There's a little bit of a break in between the last one with March Madness in general. But hey, we're back at it doing it. This is a special Week 21 and Week 22 NBA recap. Like I said, we've had the March Madness tournament going on, but hey, there's been lots going on in the NBA here. Some great games, some great individual performances. So let's hop right to it. Start in the Eastern Conference, starting in the Atlantic like we usually do, with the team with the still the best record in the NBA. I'm talking about the Boston Celtics. The past few weeks, Celtics went 5-2. Celtics crushed the Wizards and Pistons and won a close one at home against the Giannis-less Milwaukee Bucks. Celtics would then thump the Pistons and the Bulls, extending their winning streak to 9 games. But then the Celtics would go into Atlanta, go out to a 30-point lead, and then they blow said lead. Biggest blown lead by the Celtics since 1996. Then they'd play the Hawks again, and guess what? They'd lose again, this time in overtime. So the Celtics went from winning 9 in a row to losing 2 in a row just to the Hawks. And it looks as long as the Celtics don't get matched up with the Hawks in the playoffs, I think they'll do all right. And maybe if they will, maybe they'll redeem themselves. And talked up this dynamic starting five. They're back together. Drew Holiday, he made his appearance in that second Atlanta loss, returning the lineup after missing 5 of the previous games with a shoulder injury he picked up against the Wizards. And I expect this team to be pretty angry from these Atlanta losses and look to bounce back. But big matchup against the Pelicans. That'll be a fun one. The Celtics team, it looks like they're just kind of trying to fine tune their game before going on a championship run. I said it before and I'll say it again. This is championship or bust for the Celtics this season. We'll leave Beantown. We'll go to the Big Apple. Excuse me there. The Knicks went 5-1 over the past few weeks. I find themselves sitting third in the Eastern Conference. They won tough games on the West Coast, beating the Sacramento Kings and the Golden State Warriors. The Knicks would then lose to the defending champions in the Mile High City before going on a little 3 game winning streak, beating the Nets and winning another game, and then going into Toronto and destroying the Raptors by 44 points. The Raptors had a nice little tribute video for former Raptor OG Anunoby. Excuse me, even though he didn't suit up in the game. OG was back in the lineup earlier in the week against Sacramento back on March 16th, but you could see he wasn't really feeling it. And when the Knicks won over the Kings, he was having elbow issue coming back from that surgery to remove loose bone fragments, and it says he's not really feeling it playing through the pain. So hopefully he can get back before the playoffs and get back into the rotation. Some good news on the injury report was Mitchell Robinson getting off it, coming back in the lineup. He returned to the lineup in that big win against Toronto. He missed the previous 50 games with that ankle injury he picked up back in December. And he was playing some really good basketball, if you remember way back when. He was playing some good ball, and it's good to see him back on the team. Isaiah Hartenstein's been battling injuries of his own, but he's been holding down the fort. And Precious Achua, since coming from Toronto, has been doing a fantastic job lately. For the past few weeks, Jalen Brunson's been leading the Knicks, and we had some history in that big win over the Pistons by the Knicks. Dante DiVincenzo set a new Knicks franchise record, the 11 three-pointers made in one game. Still no timetable on All-Star Julius Randle returning to the lineup. He's had that lengthy injury absence with a shoulder injury. But this Knicks team, they're starting to figure out they hustle and they play defense. They got that Wildcat connection from Villanova with Brunson, and you got Hart and DiVincenzo, and you got to give a shout out to Miles Deuce McBride. He's been balling as well for the Knicks. Next up in the division, Philadelphia 76ers. They went 3-4 over the past weeks. They've been doing their best, just trying to stay afloat without MVP Joel Embiid in the lineup. It's head coach Nick Nurse said there's a good likelihood Embiid will return before the playoffs, and that's just what they need here. So they beat the Hornets and the Heat, but then they'd head out west and lose to the Suns and Lakers. And then they'd shock the Clippers in LA. 23-point game by Maxey, Harris, and Cameron Payne off the bench was the difference. The Sixers would then go on a 2 game losing streak, losing to the Kings, and then a tough one in a rematch with the Clippers. Kelly Oubre Jr. got his shot blocked at the end of regulation, and there was no foul given. He and Coach Nick Nurse went ballistic at the officials. You could see Oubre Jr. pointing each individual ref out, going, "You're a bitch, you're a bitch, you're a bitch." He apologized after the game, saying emotions were hot, but they did get fined by the league. So you gotta love the fight in the Sixers team, playing super hard without Joel Embiid in the lineup. And Tyrese Max, he must have some sore shoulders from carrying the load for this team. But I mentioned Kelly Oubre Jr. He stepped up lately, and Nick Nurse, he's been going more Mo Bamba over Paul Reed lately and trying to see what that can do. But they're hurting inside. They need Joel Embiid to walk through that door, hopefully sooner than later. Next up in the division, the Brooklyn Nets. They went 2-5 over the past few weeks, falling to the Pacers, my Spurs in overtime, the Pelicans and Bucks and the Knicks on their way to a 6-game losing streak. They'd break that streak, winning in Toronto and then winning again in Washington in overtime. A rare 2-game winning streak for this team. They've been super up and down all season since firing head coach Jacques Vaughn and replacing him with interim coach Kevin Ollie. The Nets have only gone 7-12, sticking with their up and down theme. It's like Tom Hanks and Forrest Gump with this Brooklyn Nets team. It's a box of chocolates, and you don't know what you're going to get. Cam Thomas has been consistent a little more lately, going off for 38 points in that win over the Wizards. Dennis Schroeder got the last laugh in that win over the Raptors, beating the team that he got dealt from earlier this season. I don't know what they're really doing with this team. It seems like they're still having tryouts, trying to figure out who's going to be in the team next season. Mikal Bridges, they wanted to make him that guy, but he's just not seeming to be that guy. He's not lighting the box scores up by any means, especially when you compare him to Cam Thomas's numbers lately. And, there's still questions who's going to be coaching this team next year. I don't think they're going with Kevin Ollie. I think he's holding that interim tag pretty well here, but they're playing for pride and they're playing for future work, be it in Brooklyn or elsewhere. So don't cut out the Nets here. But we'll wrap up the Atlantic, going to Toronto. Raptors went 0-7 over the past few weeks, and they're on a 12-game losing streak. The franchise record is 17 from that 97-98 season, and they're just one loss away from tying the second longest streak in franchise history. They've lost 13 games in a row a few times, but most recent back in 2010, 2011. The Raptors fell 2 games in a row to the Magic. They then lost to the Kings, Thunder, Wizards, Nets, a demoralizing 44-point loss to the Knicks. It's amazing looking at this Raptors lineup and seeing just how completely revamped it is from the beginning of the season. Grady Dick is showing some improvement with the increase of minutes, getting his name out there with some memorable jersey swaps like the one he had with Orlando Magic Anthony Black, and as they stood next to each other, it read out Black Dick. And now you got the list growing of people that want to do jersey swaps with Grady Dick. Some are saying Nasir Little, Little Dick, to Kevin Love, Dick Love, or Love Dick, whichever way you want to put it. However your immature imagination can go. But much like the Nets I just mentioned, this team is going to be having tryouts for next season. Gary Trent Jr. has had some pretty good scoring nights, and it's good to see Abaji, Freeman Liberty, and Noir get some minutes to kind of figure out who's sticking around next season. Masai Ujiri's got a lot of work ahead of him, and this team's got to do something to try to get this losing streak snapped. They don't want to start setting franchise records. But the biggest news involving the Raptors, that nothing really has been entertaining on the floor for them with their injuries and trades they've had done, with R.J. Barrett unfortunately losing his brother, with the death in the family of Emmanuel Quickley, the injury to Scotty Barnes. And you're like, what can be bigger news than that? Jonte Porter, Michael Porter Jr.'s brother, who is getting some more time with the Raptors and has had some good moments there. It's had some bad moments lately. There was a surge of bets going in on the unders for Jonte Porter, and Porter left that game early due to an illness. So anyone who bet the unders on that won. And this was a big enough win to flag enough of the betting sites to get a hold of the NBA to be like, hey, why is this guy that barely plays, why is he the biggest cash out of the night? So there's an investigation going in, but hey, this is the world we live in. Professional leagues are getting in the bed with these betting companies. The integrity of the game is really being questioned on a daily basis. Are these allegations true? What more is laying into this? There's rumors that before Porter got into the NBA, he was a baller better on these sites, making big money. So what happens when you make the NBA? What happens to that account? This is super shady. I don't know what's going to happen here. And there's already talk the NCAA are looking to eliminate prop bets on college athletics. Well, that's going to be tough to change here, Everybody wants that betting money, but I can see with these prop bets, if the over-under 4 rebounds, the guy gets 3 rebounds and suddenly his back hurts, has to leave the game, everybody's a winner. This shit's wild, but this is what's happening when you go to bed with betting companies. But we'll talk back on the court. The Raptors looking to end this losing streak. They take on the Sixers, Lakers, and Timberwolves in their next three. So I don't know if they're going to end this anytime soon. We'll see what happens. Hopefully, no one's betting on it. But leave the Atlantic. We'll go to the Central, starting with the division leading Milwaukee Bucks. They're sitting second in the Eastern Conference right now, going 3-3 over the past few weeks, winning a high-scoring game against the Suns, but then they'd lose to the Celtics without the Greek Freak in the lineup. They'd bounce back and beat the Nets, and then win big over the Thunder. Then they'd drop two straight, losing a tough one in LA to the Lakers, despite being up 19 at one point, and LeBron not even playing in the game. The Bucks would then lose to a hot Pelicans team where only three players scored in double digits. I mean, each of them scored 20 or more, but it was not to overcome the Pelicans. And then Giannis Antetokounmpo, he's playing at an MVP level. Damian Lillard's been clutch most of the season. We have Chris Middleton returning in the lineup, but there's still some questions here. Bobby Portis Jr., he's playing great off the bench. Since Doc Rivers has taken over, his role's increased, and he's just been rocking it. This team has the talent to bring another championship to the city of Milwaukee. They just got to be crisper in those moments, and that's asking a lot of a team that's sitting second in the East. But these defensive lapses or cold shooting at crucial moments, it's created serious issues for this team. And can Doc Rivers be the guy to help get these vets doing the proper shit? I mean, a lot of the core is here from that 2021 championship team. You're obviously missing that defensive edge with Drew Holiday doing his thing in Boston, but don't count this team out despite some of these recent struggles, I guess. They're the real deal, and don't be surprised if you see the Bucks raising the Larry O'Brien trophy. Like I said before the season started. I mean, it was a long time ago, but hey, it wasn't a bad pick. Next up in the division, the Cavaliers. They've cooled off as they've been trying to win some games without Donovan Mitchell. Over the past weeks, Cavs have gone 2-5, losing to the Rockets, but bouncing back and beating the Pacers. They then dropped three in a row, losing a tight one to the Heat, a double-digit loss to the Wolves, followed by a 37-point drubbing by the Heat. The Cavs bounced back and beat the Hornets, but would lose the rematch in Charlotte. You don't want to be losing in Charlotte this time of the year. These recent struggles have a lot to deal with injuries. Like I mentioned, Donovan Mitchell. He's expected to suit up today against the Sixers. He's missed a lot of time with knee and nasal issues, only playing in 2 other games in the month of March. And despite all these injuries and recent struggles, the Pacers still sit fourth. And they've been weathering the storm. More kudos to JB Bickerstaff for the job he's done there. Evan Mobley, he's healthy again. That'll really help the team. They're poised and looking to get their shit together as they go into the postseason and hope they cause a ruckus. After the Sixers game, the Cavs go on the road to face the Nuggets, Jazz, and Suns. So I'm interested to see how the Cavs do here, especially that Nuggets game. Jokic going up against Mobley and Allen. That should be a fun big man matchup there, and should be in the paint. Not too far behind the Cavs in the division are the Indiana Pacers. They went 4-3 over the past few weeks, sitting 6th in the East, just above those play-in spots. The Pacers beat the Nets, would follow the Cavs the next game. They then thumped the Pistons and went into Golden State and beat the Warriors. They follow that in a really high-scoring game against the Lakers, losing 150 to 145. Then the Pacers would bounce back and beat the Clippers by 17. But how would they follow that up? By going into Chicago and getting absolutely blown out by the Bulls. Like most of the season, the Pacers have lacked consistency. At times, they look like they could surprise teams in the postseason. Other nights, their defense looks Olay, and they're just letting the Bulls go by. Something they really need to take care of. Pascal Siakam has been a great addition. Seeing what he does on both sides of the floor, really miss him in Toronto. Miles Turner stepping his game up. I still feel he needs to rebound better. And TJ McConnell off the bench. What a vet. He just comes in, and guys look at him like he can't get by me, and he just gets by them and scores. I love it. But if they can get any consistency on the defensive side of the floor, they can do some shocking in the playoffs, like Raiden in Mortal Kombat. But before we get ahead of ourselves, they still got to stay above the play-in spots to even be considered there. We'll go a little further down to some of those play-in spots. The Chicago Bulls, they're 3-3 over the past few weeks as they're 9th in the East. They beat the Wizards and Trailblazers and then lost 3 in a row, losing to the Rockets before returning home and losing to the Celtics and Wizards. The Bulls would bounce back from that losing streak to pound the Pacers, as I just alluded to. DeMar DeRozan still doing his thing at 34. Kobe White's back in the lineup, and Ayo Dosunmu has played really great in Kobe White's absence. And unless these Bulls totally collapse and the Nets go on a huge run, it's looking like the Bulls should hold down one of these play-in spots. So they just need to get hot and play their best ball in those matchups. They have the guys that can get hot at the right moment. The guys I mentioned above, or Alex Caruso, who's still doing on both sides of the floor. Nikola Vucevic could get hot in a game. Plus, I think Andre Drummond's the real wild card here. Depending on who the Bulls get matched up with in the play-in, he could be the difference and keep them in the playoffs. We'll wrap up the Central Division going to Detroit. Pistons 0-8 over the past week as they're on an 8-game losing streak. They fell to the Heat and back to get back games. They then lose to the Celtics, Pacers, Celtics again, Pelicans, Knicks, and Timberwolves. Like other teams I've mentioned, the Nets and the Raptors, this Pistons squad seems to be just kind of developing chemistry, trying to figure out who we got for next season. Marcus Sasser, he's starting to get more time again. He had a good start to the season and kind of fills it out. James Wiseman's looking like the guy worthy of that high draft pick. He's had such a weird path to get to the NBA and hasn't played normal minutes compared to people taking around his draft pick there. Malachi Flynn, the former Raptor and Knick, it's good to see him back on the floor. Unfortunately, Oscar Thompson is going to be missing the rest of the year with a blood clot injury. That one's kind of scary. Hopefully he can bounce back from that, because when he was on the floor, he was doing damage. We got their games coming up against the Wizards, Grizzlies, and Hawks, so we'll see if they can ruin their losing streak and see how many wins they can finish the season with. We'll wrap up the Eastern Conference by going to the Southeast Division, starting with the division-leading Orlando Magic, fifth best record in the East. The Magic went 4-2 over the past few weeks, beating the Raptors in back-to-back games, as I mentioned earlier. They then won 2 games at home, one against the Hornets, one against the Pelicans. They then go on to lose in their next 2 at home, losing a tight one to the Kings, and then losing to the Golden State Warriors. The Magic have really looked good, though, other than that loss to the Warriors. But Paulo Banchero, he's playing like a legitimate number 1 overall pick, who is probably not getting talked enough because he plays in Orlando. But he's the clear leader of this team at 22 years old. Cole Anthony and Jalen Suggs seem to take turns contributing on big nights. I still think Franz Wagner needs to elevate his game back to more where he was at pre-injury earlier in the year. Back when I was calling them a two-headed beast, now Banchero is the head above that head. He's leading this team. This team's young, and they got to lose in the playoffs first, they say, but no one wants to get matched up with this young and hungry team in a 7-game series. Just behind the Magic in the division are the Miami Heat, 7th best record in the East and sitting in that play-in spot. They went 4-3 over the past few weeks, beating the Pistons in back-to-back games, as I mentioned earlier. The Heat then lost to Philly and then bounced back to beat the Cavaliers. They returned home, got crushed by the Pelicans, but then they crushed the Cavaliers. And then followed that up by losing to the Warriors without Jimmy Butler in the lineup. The Heat are getting healthy, minus Duncan Robinson, who's missed a few games with a back issue. But Miami are trying to get all these healthy pieces used to playing with each other. This Heat team can look damn good, like they did in the Cavaliers wins, and then they can stink up the joint against tough competition, like they did against the Sixers, Pelicans, and Warriors. Jimmy Butler still carries his team with enough swag for an entire team. Terry Rozier is still finding his way after coming from Charlotte earlier in the season. Kevin Love, Jimmy Butler, and Tyler Hero should be available for the game today against the Blazers. And this Heat team, they would probably prefer to elevate themselves in the standings to get out of the play-in altogether. But we know what the Heat did from the play-in spot last year. They went all the way to the NBA Finals. So if there's a team that can do it, it's them. Well, sitting in the 10th spot in the East, the next team in the division, last team in the play-in position, Atlanta Hawks. They went 5-3 over the past few weeks, and they have won 4 games in a row. They lost a tight one to the Jazz and bounced back and beat the Clippers in LA. But then they get crushed by the Lakers by 31 on the second night of a back-to-back. Then the Hawks would go to Phoenix and drop a game to the Suns before returning home and winning 4 in a row. Destroying a Hornets team by 41, they then come back from 30 down to surprise the Celtics, as I mentioned earlier. The Hawks would then beat the Blazers by 14 before beating the Celtics again. This time in overtime with DeJounte Murray getting hot at the right time, taking over overtime, and then hitting the game-winning shot with .1 on the clock. He was gunning hard in that second win over the Celtics, finishing with 44 points on 44 shots, 7 dimes, 7 boards in the win. But Murray joined some gunning record books there, becoming just the 3rd player since 2000 to take 44 or more shots in the game. Russell Westbrook's done it, and the legendary Kobe Bryant, may he rest in peace, 6 times he has shot 44 or more. That's bonkers. That's Kobe mentality right there. That's some gunning. The Hawks have been on a tear lately. Like I said, Murray's looking like maybe he should get the team keys going forward, and Trae Young might need to get traded. Bogdan Bogdanovic is a legit scorer in this league, and I'm liking how he did the Mellow 3 or Rasheed Wallace, whoever you want to refer to it, for doing the head tap. He did it because he's been feeling it. DeAndre Hunter's elevated his game. Shout out to Czech baller Vit Krejci. He's played really well as well. The Hawks are suddenly deeper than a swimming pool, and they're getting hot at the right time. The fact they've beaten the number one seeded Celtics twice in a 4 game period, that's got to give some concern to those higher seeds in the Eastern Conference, and we'll see if the Hawks can even get out of the play-in stage. We'll go from Atlanta to Charlotte. The Hornets went 1-5 over the past few weeks, dropping 5 in a row before picking up a win. They dropped games to the Suns, Sixers, Magic, Hawks, and Cavaliers, but then in that rematch with the Cavaliers, the Hornets would get a surprising victory. Number 2 overall pick Brandon Miller has shown flashes of his potential and dropping 31 and 6 rebounds in that big win over the Cavs. Newly developing Hornets are kind of figuring it out on the fly here. They had 7 scorers hit double-digit figures in that win. Trey Mann, who was hyping up after the trade, he was having a good game. Vasily Micic, he's looking like a great backcourt partner. The 2 former OKC Thunder guys are finding their way in Buzz City. LaMelo Ball is still out for the rest of the season. So, like other teams I mentioned earlier, it's tryout time. They're getting Hornets out there, and they're going to see who remains in the Hive next season. I'm looking forward to Brandon Miller's sophomore season. I'm expecting a big leap from him next season. We'll wrap up the Eastern Conference by going to the American capital. The Washington Wizards went 3-4 over the past few weeks, which is surprising for the Wizards. That's a lot of wins for them. The Wizards lost by huge margins to the Bulls, Celtics, and Rockets, and then they surprised the Kings with a huge night from Kyle Kuzma, dropping 31 points in the win. The Wizards would then win 2 close games, one at home over the Raptors, and then another one over Chicago and the Bulls. The Wizards would then return home and lose a close one in overtime to the Nets. But this Wizards team is looking like an actual NBA team lately, which is promising considering they looked a lot like the Washington Generals most of the season. So a lot of these players are locked up for next year. So we'll see what kind of guys they want to keep or put on the trading block. A matchup between Eastern basement dwellers probably going on right now with the Wizards and the Pistons. So we'll see who is going to stay in the basement there. We'll leave the Eastern Conference, go to the Northwest Division, and the Western Conference leading Denver Nuggets. Number 1 spot in the West, number 1 in the division. That spot's had a rotating door to see who sits on top of this conference and division all season. As of now, this recording, the defending champions lead the way. The Denver Nuggets went 5-2 over the past few weeks, easily taking care of my Spurs in San Antonio. They'd lose a tight one on the Mavericks when Kyrie Irving made an outrageous left-handed game-winning shot to beat Jokic and the Nuggets. Nuggets would then win a close one over division rivals Minnesota before beating the Knicks, Blazers, and Grizzlies. Then they drop one at home to the Phoenix Suns. Nuggets have been playing some good ball despite missing Canadian Jamal Murray, who's missed the last few games with a knee injury. He's expected to miss that big showdown with the Timberwolves, another divisional bout that could help decide the number 1 spot in the conference. Jokic is playing at an MVP level, and with Murray's absence, guys like Reggie Jackson, Christian Brown have really stepped up. This team is looking like a championship team that is more than capable of repeating as champions. Next up in the division and conference are those Minnesota Timberwolves I was just mentioning. They went 5-1 over the past few weeks, getting back-to-back wins in Utah over the Jazz. The Wolves then hosted the Nuggets and lost, as I just mentioned, but then the Wolves would get back in winning ways, beating the Cavs, Warriors, and Pistons. They take that current 3-game winning streak to the Mile High City for that game I just alluded to in the Nuggets portion. And I mentioned Jimmy Butler having swag to lead an entire team. Anthony Edwards is cut from that same cloth, the swag cloth. I'd say his offensive game is even more superior to Jimmy Butler's. And he's only 22 years old. He's growing, developing, and cocky the whole way. Since Karl Anthony Towns went down and had that surgery to repair his meniscus, still no timetable on that. Edwards has really stepped up and really filling in the front court. Naz Reid, wow, the importance of having a solid backup in this league. This guy could be starting on a lot of teams in the NBA. The fact he fills in there, it's really showing his worth. And another shout out to Mike Conley Jr., the 36-year-old vet, elevating his offense lately when the team calls upon it. Team's still best defense in the league. Rudy Gobert anchoring it. And when you play great defense and you have confidence, the sky's the limit. right there with the Timberwolves and Nuggets is this team with the same win-loss record as the Timberwolves. I'm talking the Oklahoma City Thunder. Thunder went 4-2 over the past few weeks, winning some easier games over the Grizzlies, Jazz, and Raptors, but then they were beaten up, physically beaten up by the Bucks in Milwaukee. The Thunder would bounce back and beat a tough Pelican team, but then they'd lose at home to a hot Rockets team in overtime. When they didn't have SGA in that loss to the Rockets. And last episode, I was like, where's Josh Giddey going to end up here? Where does he fit in with this team? And he must have heard me and been like, yo, shut your trap. Dropping 31 points in that overtime loss to the Rockets. He's had some good games lately here. This team is just so deep, so talented, but oh so young. And you worry come playoff time, like, are they going to get matched up against a physical veteran team like Milwaukee bullied them? Or are they just going to be like, yo, you're worrying too much. We're going to take it to that veteran team. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander continuing to play at an MVP level. I'll get more to who should win the Michael Jordan MVP trophy later, but he's up there. And J-Dub, Jalen Williams, like I said, a legit second scorer in the league. Chet Holmgren's the wild card here. He's using those long arms and learning to fly, picking up big strides like an albatross. And it's the reason they've been at the top of the Western Conference all season. Next up in this very top-heavy Northwest is the Utah Jazz, who went 1-7 over the past few weeks, as they're on a 7-game losing streak. They won that close game at home, where the Hawks, where the Keontae George, the rookie, had 25 and led the team in scoring. But it's been all downhill from there. And in Utah, those hills are pretty high, so it could get sketchy. The Jazz would lose back-to-back games to the Timberwolves, fall to the Thunder, the Mavericks, the Rockets by 28, the Mavericks again, then my Spurs. But looking at that schedule, those are tough teams for anyone in the league, and it's going to be tough for the Jazz going forward, playing in such a tough division, you know? Lauri Markkanen, he's playing close to his all-star level, but it just hasn't been enough. He's had lingering injuries. Will Hardy's been tinkering with his rotation, still not getting that down. Lots to figure out in Utah. And as I mentioned, those 3 teams above Utah in this division, it's hard to crack that. And having to play them so often, mamma mia. We'll wrap up the Northwest by going to Portland. The Blazers went 0-7 over the past few weeks. Losers of 8 in a row now. They'd lose some close ones and some double-digit ones. They'd fall to the Pelicans, Bulls, Clippers twice, Nuggets, Rockets, and Hawks. They have a Florida trip coming up against the Heat, followed by a game against the Magic as they try to end their losing streak. We're having 2 winnable games, one in Charlotte and the other in D.C. The Blazers, like a lot of teams I'm mentioning on this podcast episode, it's tryout season. They're trying to figure out who's going to be carried over in the next season's roster. One player who's got to make the cut. Canadian Delano Banton, the former Raptor and Celtics, seem to have found a home in the Northwest United States, dropping 31 points and 9 dimes off the bench in that recent loss to the Hawks. He and fellow Trailblazer number 3 overall pick Scoot Henderson, they've been some bright spots here. And again, we got to shout out Duop Reith. The Aussie's been making the most of the minutes he's getting in Portland. Obviously, they want to probably play DeAndre Ayton more, but he's had trouble staying on the floor. When he's on the floor, he's one of the best rebounders in the game. But Reith is doing what he needs to when called upon. I like the Great Barrier Reith because he's from Australia. Good nickname. We'll leave the Northwest, go to the Pacific, starting with the division-leading Los Angeles Clippers. Clippers have the 4th best record in the West and went 3-4 over the past week, losing back-to-back games to Birds, losing to the Pelicans and then the Hawks. The Clippers would then beat the Trailblazers in back-to-back games, but then would lose 2 straight again. This time to the Sixers and Pacers, the latter by 17. The Clippers would then win a close one in Philadelphia, where Paul George and Kawhi Leonard made some big plays down the stretch. Kawhi pinning a Kelly Oubre shot on the backboard, and then Paul George making it an offensive play that, you know what, some would call a foul. I may plead the 5th, or I'll just say that looked like a foul. But regardless, that's where Kelly Oubre Jr., as I mentioned, went up and said, "You're a bitch, you're a bitch, you're a bitch." Kind of like the How High scene where he's like, fuck you, you're cool, I'm out, love it. But anyway, he let the refs know about it. Clippers escape with a win there. The recent lackluster effort's been kind of tough to explain. You can't really blame injuries. They had some good news on that front. Russell Westbrook returning from his fractured hand injury. The team looks like they're almost bored with the regular season. They're like, bring on the postseason already. Let's get it started. Let's start this title run. Kawhi Leonard's been playing in the most games this season than he has in a while, and the rest of the team, they just look like they're done with the regular season. Let's move on to the postseason. I know maybe you don't want to tempt fate, do that, or poke some bears, but let me tell you, no team wants to play the Clippers in a 7-game series. Come playoff time, if this team stays healthy, they could be raising a championship banner in their brand new arena next season. So don't doubt the Clippers yet. Next up in the Pacific, the Phoenix Suns. They went 5-2 over the past few weeks, and they have that seventh best record in the tight West, which is a play-in spot. They beat the Hornets, but would lose to the Bucks the following game, and then the Suns bounced back and reeled off 3 straight wins, beating the Sixers, Hawks, and Spurs. But then the Suns would drop the rematch against the Spurs, losing to the Spurs without Wembanyama in the game. Did not see that coming. The Suns would then bounce back by going and defend Denver and beating the defending champion Denver Nuggets. How's that? You lose to the Spurs, then you beat the Nuggets the next day. Crazy. KD was massive in that game over the Nuggets, scoring 30 points, 13 boards. Devin Booker's been putting up some big numbers lately, and Beal is kind of finding his niche in that third scorer spot. But perhaps, weirdly to say, with all the talent on this team, that, dare I say, former Duke Blue Devil Grayson Allen may be one of the most important pieces on this team in the playoffs. The way he's shooting the ball from outside and the way he can get hot, can swing a tight game in the Suns' favor. I think he's going to be really important to them. He's kind of usurped Eric Gordon on that team. But don't count out EG come playoff time either. But they're in the play-in, so who knows if they'll even get out of there. But like I said with the Clippers, you don't want to be in a 7-game series with a team that has Kevin Durant and can get hot. So we'll see what happens with the Suns. But just behind the Suns in the division and in the conference are the Sacramento Kings. They went 4-3 over the past few weeks. Kings lost at home to the Knicks, but they bounced back and beat the Grizzlies in OT, crushed the Raptors in Toronto, but then they get stunned by the Wizards in the second night of a back-to-back. The Kings then bounced back after a few nights off, going into Orlando and beating the Magic. They then beat the Sixers, but then get thumped by 36 on their own floor by the Dallas Mavericks. The Kings have been kind of inconsistent throughout their games lately, which leads them in some tough spots late in games. Sometimes late in games they're not even in the game. One constant you can say has been non-All-Star again. I'll say non-All-Star. I still don't know how he didn't make the team. Domantas Sabonis, his 55th consecutive double-double in that loss against the Mavs, ties him with Jerry Lucas for the longest streak in Kings franchise history, and Sabonis is tied for the 9th longest all time. The current record for double-doubles, none other than the monster of all record holders, Wilt Chamberlain. The double-double streak record, I just mentioned Sabonis at 55. The record of Wilt Chamberlain, 227 games. So Sabonis has a way to go. Keegan Murray, Harrison Barnes, Malik Monk, they seem to kind of share the scoring load behind De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk especially. But this team just seems to be lacking that punch late in games. It's hard to put my finger on it. But this team better figure it out or else they won't make the playoffs. They're currently 8th in the West as of this recording, and they're 1 game back of that Sweet 6 seed, so they're just outside of getting out of the play-in spots. This is going to come down to the last day of the season. So hopefully no letdowns for Sacramento, who have got one letdown dealt to them today when it was found out Red Velvet, Kevin Huerter, is undergoing season-ending shoulder surgery to repair a torn labrum. So who's going to be filling in there? Is it going to be some of those guys I mentioned earlier? Or is it going to be former first-round pick Davion Mitchell? Maybe Keon Ellis is going to take even more minutes and thrive more into the rotation. Lots of questions for these Kings. Or is Mike Brown going to be able to answer them and get this team ready to go into the playoffs? Right behind the Kings in the division and the conference, the Los Angeles Lakers, 9th best record in the West. They've went 5-1 over the past few weeks and rock a 5-game winning streak. They lost at home to the Golden State Warriors, but have turned it up since then, destroying the Hawks by 31. They then beat the Sixers and then beat the Pacers in a game that had a combined 195 points. The Lakers would then have an improbable comeback to take the Bucks to overtime and complete the comeback, winning in the extra frame. The Lakers then won another high-scoring affair, this time over the Grizzlies. The Lakers are getting hot at the right time. LeBron missed some time with an ankle injury, but the ageless wonder is back in the lineup and doing his thing. All of these Lakers are stepping up. Every Laker that you're like, that guy needs to play better, they've been playing great. D'Angelo Russell, Austin Reeves especially, Spencer Dinwiddie, and Rui Hachimura. Rui's 32 points and 10 rebounds against the Grizzlies. Huge. But the biggest reason for the Lakers' success, you got to look above your eyes. You got to look at the brow. Anthony Davis, he's been balling both sides of the floor, playing at MVP type level. No joke on that. 34 points, 23 boards, and 3 blocks against the Greek Freak in Milwaukee. Huge, especially without LeBron in the lineup. Those young teams in the top of the Western Conference that I was talking about earlier, they do not want to see a hot Laker team coming in. That could really put a damper on a young team's very successful regular season. We'll wrap up the Pacific. We'll go to the Golden State Warriors. They went 4-3 over the past few weeks. Warriors won that big game against the Lakers I just alluded to, but then they lose to the Knicks. They'd bounce back, crush the Grizzlies, but then lose 2 in a row, dropping a game to the Pacers and then on the road to the Timberwolves. The Warriors would then win back-to-back games in Florida, beating the Heat and the Magic. And that game against the Magic, you could see some visible frustration on Steph Curry. And it was all brought on by who else? Draymond Green. Draymond Green was thrown out of that game just 4 minutes in. He was cussing out the officials pretty good. And as a white person, I cannot repeat what Draymond Green was saying there. Steph Curry and the Warriors, they did enough to take the win in Orlando, and you could see Draymond confront him and everybody after the game like, my bad. But if they lost that game, things could have been different. And you could see the frustration. And like, it almost looked like Curry was tearing up on the floor. It's like, man, give me a fucking break. Just play the game. Give me a hand here. But this isn't the Warriors of years past. They can't just hit that switch and turn things on and hope things go the way they used to. They're holding down in that 10th and final spot, but I'll mention a team coming up here that's nipping at their heels. We'll head to the Southwest to wrap up our NBA recap, starting with the division-leading New Orleans Pelicans. The Pelicans have the 5th best record in the Western Conference and have gone 6-2 over the past few weeks, including winning 3 in a row, taking down the Clippers, Blazers, and Nets. They then lose big in Orlando, but turn it around and won the very next night, blowing out the Heat. New Orleans would then go to Detroit and win big before returning home and losing a feisty battle with the Thunder. The Pelicans would then win a nationally televised showdown with the Bucks, and Zion Williamson has really stepped his game up and looked like the guy we expected to see. The guy who this wild-ass podcaster predicted to win MVP at the beginning of the season. I mean, if he's playing like he is now, if he played like this all season, we might be talking that. But he's had some stretches where he wasn't. But this is the healthy, the thinner Zion Williamson, and it's just amazing to watch. He overpowers you. He jumps you. It doesn't make any sense. And like his one alley-oop dunk, he looked like one of the Monstars from Space Jam, the original Space Jam, by the way. But you wondered, what would this team be doing with Brandon Ingram going down? And when he went down, it looked catastrophic. So luckily the injury's not as bad as they said. But in his absence, C.J. McCollum's elevated his game. Trey Murphy III, man, that guy's lights out. He's not just a good shooter. He can attack the hoop. When anybody's called upon, any Pelican fills in and does what a good Pelican should. You have the intoxicating defensive pressure of Herb Jones. The throwdown dunks of Larry Nance, or those rare appearances where you get to see the 14th overall pick, Jordan Hawkins. He doesn't get a lot of time because this team's so deep. But they are the real deal. And if they play this way and get Ingram back, you don't want to play them either. And just behind those Pelicans in the Southwest and in the conference, the team with the 6th best record in the Western Conference, the Dallas Mavericks. They have gone 5-0 in the past few weeks, and they're rocking a 5-game winning streak. The Mavs won a close one at home over the defending champion Denver Nuggets. They then beat the Spurs, the Jazz twice, and the Kings by 36. Speaking of playing hot at the right time, the Mavericks are doing just that. Luka Doncic looking like, hey, maybe I want to win the MVP. And those people that said Kyrie Irving and Luka could not play together, shame on you. They look so damn dynamic together. And in that game where Luka was cold as ice against the Spurs, he only had 18 points. Kyrie steps right up and then some, making big shots. And Luka was more than happy dishing it out, finishing with 16 points and a triple-double. And that's the beautiful thing. In years past, if you stop Luka, you stop the Mavs. Now, if you're sloping him down any bit, you know what's going to happen. Kyrie Irving is going to step up and he's going to take over. This Mavericks team, it has counters now. It's got more counters than a kitchen sales store. This recent hot streak's no joke. This team's trying to stay above those play-in spots, avoid that whole situation. But it's a tight race in the West, and it's going to come down to the last days of the season. But like other teams I've mentioned in the Western Conference, you don't want to play the Mavs in a 7-game series. Next up in the Southwest, the hottest team in the NBA, and I'm not talking temperature wise, although I'm sure Texas is warm this time of the year. I'm talking the Houston Rockets. They went 6-0 over the past few weeks. They're on a league best right now, 10-game winning streak. The Rockets beat the Cavs, thumped the Wizards, Bulls, Jazz, and Blazers. They faced off with one of the West's best in OKC, beat them in overtime. A lot of people, including myself, figured when Turkish big man Alperen Şengün went down, the Rockets' playoffs hopes were nothing but pipe dreams now. But they're smoking it good right now. They're closing the gap on the 10th place Warriors. I didn't think they had a chance to catch them, but with this recent tear, they are now one game behind the Golden State Warriors for that last play-in spot. I did not expect this. Jalen Green is showing everyone that he's deserving of that number 2 overall pick status in 2021. He's been lights out for the Rockets, putting up huge numbers. That's just absolutely killing the opposition. That combined with the increased play of Amon Thompson, small lineup of Jabari Smith and Dylan Brooks in the front court, it's been great. Steady Freddie Van Fleet doing his thing. An old school point guard, Chauncey Billups, called him out recently and said he's one of the last old school point guards, and they miss him in Toronto. What he does, his veteran leadership is just great. This team's crushing teams right now and looking the real deal. Better late than ever. We small pieces of this earlier in the year with Şengün involved. Him out, this team is just something else. We saw the video shared online of injured Rocket Terry Eason leaving a message for the Golden State team saying, Warriors, come out and play. From, the iconic movie, The Warriors. And this is the kind of drama the play-in can bring. I'm hoping the Rockets can keep winning here and make the callers of those play-in teams right now get a little tighter. Next up in the Southwest, the Memphis Grizzlies. They went 1-5 over the past week. Grizz falling to the Thunder, the Kings in OT, the Warriors by a huge margin. The Grizzlies bounce back, going on the road and beating my Spurs, and then they'd get involved in a high-scoring duel with the Lakers and fall a little short, but some good things to see in Memphis. Desmond Bane, Brandon Clark are back on the floor. This injury-riddled season has been a trainer's dream salary-wise. I guess they've been busy. But on the floor, we have not seen a lot of these guys. So it's good to see some familiar faces back on the floor. But at least with the injuries, it's had that same kind of tryout atmosphere some other teams have shown. And with these extra minutes available, we've got to see guys like Gigi Jackson, Santi Aldama, Scottie Pippen Jr., Jake LaRavia, Lamar Stevens coming over in that trade. These guys are getting more time. They're helping the show off to see if they should be included on this roster next season, or worst case, at least open the eyes of some front office execs who might have overlooked them and say, hey, they're giving it every night for this Grizzlies team. Because at least, if you're going to watch the Grizzlies, you might not know who's starting the game, but they're going to leave it all on the floor. Wrapping up this lengthy NBA recap, 2 weeks worth, with the San Antonio Spurs. My Spurs had to rock the jersey. Current Western basement dwellers, they were on a very rare 3-4 record this past few weeks. That's a few wins for the Spurs, who have not had a lot of them this season. It's making me tongue-tied, all these wins they're getting. The Spurs would lose to the defending champion Denver Nuggets, but bounce back and beat the Nets in overtime. Spurs would then drop 3 straight, losing to the Mavs, Grizzlies, and Suns. But like I said earlier, the Spurs would shock the Suns. And without Wembanyama, they won the game with a clutch shot by Jeremy Sohan, who finished the game with 26 points and 18 boards. The Spurs would follow that up with a win in Utah, getting a rare 2-game winning streak. The season's had its up and downs, mostly downs in the standings, especially in the loss column, but the ups, they've been special. Watching the development of Victor Wembanyama, it's been something else. Like his compatriot and current Philadelphia 76er, Nicholas Batum, said, this might be the worst season of his career. Not to put pressure on the number 1 overall pick or anything, but as long as he doesn't face injuries, it's all uphill from here. It's got to be. And I'm looking forward to see how long this short winning streak can go, and if my Spurs can play some playoff spoilers for some teams looking to move up the standings. But hey, that's an NBA recap, 2 weeks worth. How's that feel? Feels good, Brian. But how are you liking your team? A lot of eyes have been on March Madness, deservedly so. Mine are going to go there after finishing this recording. But don't keep your eyes off the NBA. The playoffs are on the horizon, and they should be great. I mentioned team recaps. Let's check some individual stat numbers here. Point per game leader, we still have Mavericks Luka Doncic leading the lead at 33.9 per game. Milwaukee's Giannis Antetokounmpo and OKC Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, both behind him but averaging over 30 a game. Just under that 30 mark, Phoenix's Kevin Durant and Boston's Jason Tatum. Rebounding department, Sacramento's DeMontis Sabonis, remember not an all-star, leading the league at 13.7 rebounds per game. Just behind him, Minnesota's Rudy Gobert, LA's Anthony Davis, Denver's Nikola Jokic, and Detroit's Jalen Duren. On the assist side of things, still no change at the top. Tyrese Halliburton, only player averaging double digits in assists with 11 per game. Just behind him, you got Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic, Clippers' James Harden, and Sacramento's Domantas Sabonis. On the defensive side of things, Oklahoma City's SGA still leading the league in steals with 2.1. Just behind him at 2 per game, Sacramento's De'Aaron Fox. Just under that 2 per game mark, Portland's Matisse Thybulle, Clippers' Kawhi Leonard, and Chicago's Alex Caruso. Our shot block leader, number 1 overall pick, Victor Wembanyama, Spurs giant, leads the league with 3.5 blocks per game. Behind him, Utah's Walker Kessler, finally getting more minutes. They're listening to me on the podcast here. Thank you, Will Hardy. Milwaukee's Brook Lopez and Oklahoma City's Chet Holmgren and LA Laker Anthony Davis. So that means we had a 2-week gap between the last Ren City top 5. Guess what, though? Not a lot of changes there. Number 1, Boston Celtics. 2, Denver Nuggets. 3, Minnesota Timberwolves. 4, Oklahoma City Thunder. And 5, Milwaukee Bucks. This list has the exact same 5 teams as last episode, with just a tiny change. Despite those struggles against the Hawks, I still have Boston at the number 1 spot. Behind them is the West leading Denver Nuggets, legit threats to defend their championship. The 3rd spot, I have Minnesota sneaking ahead of OKC, who I had higher than them last episode. They could have stayed there. Those are pretty interchangeable. Like I said, same win-loss record, but the Timberwolves do have a longer winning streak. I have the Bucks in wrapping up the top 5 in that 5th spot, but that spot could have been a toss-up here. You got the surging Dallas Mavericks. Also in the Southwest, you got the Pelicans or the Mike Caliente Houston Rockets. Either of those Southwest teams could have usurped that 5th spot. Going back to the individual awards, MVP choice, I still got to go with Oklahoma City Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. It's a coin flip, literally, between him and Jokic. And as that coin's being flipped in the air, I'm calling Shea. And if this Dallas Mavericks team keeps flying up the standings, Luka Doncic will have to enter this chat as well. Rookie of the Year, we're not going to spend a lot of time there. Just give it to Wembanyama. That's why I'm wearing his jersey in this podcast again, to rep him on that. Just give him the trophy. 6th Man of the Year, Sacramento's Malik Monk. I feel Tim Hardaway Jr. was in there beginning of the year. He's fallen out of contention. 2 guys that have replaced him in that order, Karis LeVert of Cleveland and Milwaukee's Bobby Portis Jr. I mentioned him earlier. Since Doc has come in, it's been the right remedy for Portis Jr. He's been playing great coming off the bench. Most Improved Player of the Year, still a close one. I've been reading more and more of Tyrese Maxey getting it of Philly. Come on, he was that guy last year. Let's not give it to that. He's already an all-star. Let's give it to someone else. I'm sticking with Kobe White of the Chicago Bulls. I like Jalen Johnson's chances, but he's missed too many games this year, and so he's not eligible to win it. A dark horse, but another guy that I think kind of had the talent already, but Jonathan Kuminga, what he's done in Golden State, his increased role, I wouldn't be butthurt if he got it there. Defensive Player of the Year, it's going to France. We know that. I think it's going to Rudy Gobert. He's going to get another one. He's anchoring the number 1 defense in the league, and that goes a long way. Everyone's like, whoa, what with the blocks? Come on, Rudy, come on. You know, Wembanyama's leading it. But remember, Marc Gasol won it in 2012, 2013 with the Grizzlies. He wasn't leading the league in the blocks, but he was anchoring the best defense in the league and doing the right things to help them succeed. I think Rudy gets it based on that, but it's Wembanyama's going forward. He's the captain now. Coach of the Year, that's going to be tough. I feel like it's got to go to one of those teams out west, one of those top teams. We kind of expected the defending champions to be good, so I think it'd be hard to give it to Michael Malone in Denver, but it's got to go to Minnesota, or it's got to go to Oklahoma City. So whether it's Chris Finch or Mark Daigneault, it's got to be whoever's got the highest standings come the end of the year. But if we have a wild card in this race, and I do like wild cards, JB Bickerstaff of Cleveland. I've mentioned the adversity Cleveland's dealt with. Donovan Mitchell should be coming back today, but he's missed some times. Everybody's missed time in Cleveland, and he's just been holding it down together. Again, shout out to JB Bickerstaff, but I think it's going to Chris Finch or Mark Daigneault. And I'm not trying to hate Joe Mazzulla and the Celtics here. They have the best record in the league. If he won it, I wouldn't be surprised either, but we were all expecting the Celtics to be this good and their championship team or bust. Minnesota or Oklahoma, nobody had them being this good at this point of the year. I don't know. If you did, good on you. Hopefully you're making money off it. But hey, that's a wrap up of a wrap up. Episode 21 and 22, we combined it. Some kind of hybrid episode. We rolled it all into one and we smoked it. It was a fine doobie, hopefully, for you. And that's a lot to recap. Talking lots of ball, March Madness. We have the Sports and Short podcast, Sports and Shorts of Sorts podcast with Ren City, your man. We just dropped the episode last Monday. Lots of college. We got the Premier League and stuff coming back, but this is all NBA, and I thank you for coming out again. Next week, we only have a few left, and we're in the playoffs, baby, so we'll see what happens. We'll play in, we'll play off, we'll do it all. We'll hold our follow through, and we'll take care. Thanks again for coming out. Ren City, yo.